Welcome into the newest episode of Side Mission. Like always, I'm your host, Rusty Ellis, joined by just one of the boys today, Matt. Matt, I don't know that we have done a solo episode, just the two of us. Have we?
We have. In fact,
we
it was actually another. It was another JRPG, which was Xenoblade 3.
Xenoblade 3, you're right. See, I'm fucking stupid. How did I forget that? I remember that episode. How did I forget that? Well, anyways, we're talking about a JRPG today, and one that we actually weren't going to do an episode on, and because, to be honest, you were the only one that knew the release date of the Side Mission Boys. I didn't know that this game came out, that was set to come out this year, but it did. So it's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. That is a mouthful of a fucking title.
Yep.
That is a mouthful. But yeah, the remaster, for the people who are like, oh, remake versus remaster, no, this is a remaster. Now, to be fair, this is a really good remaster.
Yeah.
This is a really, really solid remaster. I think that there's a negative connotation with the word remaster versus the word remake, and remasters like this are good remasters. Now, remasters that are lazy, that just barely up the resolution, those are lazy. This is not a lazy remaster, in my opinion. This is actually a really good remaster, and as someone who's never played Crisis Core before, I feel like this is a really, really, really good first experience for it. There's a lot of things in this game that, for a PSP game, still really hold up today, and I think, Matt, the biggest thing is the gameplay. Just like Final Fantasy VII Remake, it's more of that free flow. It's more of that Final Fantasy 15, kind of combat. But what I liked here, Matt, and you tell me, because I never played the original. You played the original. Was the combat in the original this fast?
Actually, no, they definitely improved the combat.
So the combat speed was increased, you think? Okay.
Yeah, you got to consider the fact that the original came on the PSP.
Yeah. If this tried to run on the PSP's probably exploding.
Yeah, exactly. The original, I vaguely remember it because it was so long ago. But like the quality of life improvements here are definitely make the experience of playing this game the definitive experience. So they should just call this the definitive edition. And I vaguely I remember just like how much of a slog the original was to get through with just the long loading times, because here they definitely improved upon that.
Yes.
So I think that this was a great time to remake this game, remaster this game, especially due to what is currently going on with the Final Fantasy VII storyline, especially with how remake is just completely revamping everything.
Yeah. No, I agree. We'll get into the ending a little bit later. Spoiler alert for anybody that doesn't want to hear the ending of this game, in case you don't already know how this game ends. It's an old game, so I don't know how that is. But what do you think about the flow of gameplay in this remaster, Matt? Because that was one thing that I was kind of iffy about the entire time. Was I feel like in combat, the gameplay flows really well. Outside of it, I feel like you really more or less just walk like 10 to 20 feet at a time, and then you get a transition screen, and then you get a loading screen, and then you get 10 to 20 more steps, and then another loading screen. Do you think that this game flowed well, or do you think that's more of this game being a remaster of a PSP game, and that's kind of like just part of it?
I think that this is a common theme that we get with Square Enix games, because, if anyone remembers, Kingdom Hearts 3, there was a joke about how every time you took a couple of steps, you had a cutscene. It was the same way with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Square Enix just has a very specific thing. Now, one thing I noticed, and this is harking back to the original, is you can, when you're doing some of these missions here in this game, you can actually avoid a lot of fights because
just by hugging the wall, yeah.
Just hugging the wall, exactly. And sometimes you're lucky enough to find a chest against the wall, so you're able to almost completely, skip a lot of just the nuisance fights and just get straight to the final missions, in boss there at the end there. But I forgot how annoying it was, especially during Chapter 4, where it's just constantly cutscene after cutscene, especially after some little kid steals your wallet, and then you literally interact with one NPC, then you get a cutscene with Aerith, you interact with another cutscene with Aerith, and it just kind of it really does kind of break it for me.
The immersion, yeah.
Exactly. I understand that especially when it comes to Final Fantasy VII, a lot of the world building comes from the characters' interactions with each other. But I think at some point you just really gotta let the player play this game. You know what I mean?
No, I do. I definitely think that this game is very, very cutscene heavy. My playthrough was about 10 hours long, and I'd venture that probably 45 minutes to an hour of that playthrough was probably just cutscenes. And that's a pretty hefty chunk of a game to be cutscenes. Now, it would be a little bit better if it wasn't, especially when it comes to the in-game cinematics. It'd be a lot better if those were brought up to, this current generation's engine, they were not. That's the only part of performance of this game that I'm like kind of iffy on, is the in-game cinematics are completely just ripped from the original and put into this one. It's the exact same resolution, exact same kind of performance. It's kind of blurry a little bit, and you really see it, especially in the last cutscene of the game. Because we have a comparison of what it looked like in Final Fantasy VII Remake, because it wasn't just the same cutscene in Final Fantasy VII Remake. They actually upped the resolution, and it looked a lot better. Now, we obviously know why that was, because Final Fantasy VII Remake completely changed the ending of Crisis Core, or at least. There's all that theory of, it's in an alternate timeline, this, that, the other. So, but, we saw what it could look like. And instead of this one, it's more just the PSP version. And I don't think that that's lazy. I think that that's trying to keep the skeleton of the original game there. But you do have to ask that question, why not upgrade the visuals there?
Yeah, I got to that opening cutscene with Zack on the train. And I was kind of like, okay, so they did not redo the cutscenes. Like, this is straight from the PSP game. But I will say this: it really shows how good this game did look on the PSP for its time.
Yes,
and like the cutscenes held up really well. Especially, I remember like this game coming out after the movie that they did called Advent Children, which I remember seeing that for the first time, and I was shocked, like, that they were able to pull something off like this. Now, looking back at it now, it has definitely shown its age, but I really do kind of appreciate the fact that they did do what they did, because, like, I mean, at the end of the day, this is not a remake. This is not what they did with, Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
This is a remaster, and It was kind of distracting when you did kind of get from the PSP visuals to the more modern, remake engine that they used. But I mean, there's not a lot of cutscenes that use that engine, which is that's not the in-game engine, but that's just the CGI or whatever. But I guess it really does keep, like, the whole, like, the PSP game just was, like, as I said before, just a great testament to how it looked. So I wasn't mad at it. I didn't remember messaging you thinking, like, Jesus Christ, dude, did they actually
is the entire game like this? Yeah,
exactly. Is the whole entire game going to be like this? And, like, I mean, I also did kind of a quick comparison between Remake and this game when it came to the in-game graphics. I don't know. I don't think the character models look as good as they did in Remake.
And I agree with you on that. I think that there's a little bit less detail. And I think that that's something that really stuck out to me, was there's just a little bit less detail. But I would also say that with Remake, and I know that there's no excuse here, but Remake, Final Fantasy VII Remake was in development for years.
Oh, yeah.
For years, dude. Like, they had a long time to get that stuff right. Now, Crisis Core, this to me has the feel of, okay, we changed the ending in Final Fantasy VII Remake, or we brought the alternate timeline in. Now let's take advantage of this hype that we've potentially created for this, and let's do a remaster of Crisis Core. And it definitely feels like a smaller development cycle went into this one. Yeah, definitely doesn't feel like this one had a similar development. Now, that's not to say it was a bad development cycle, because this game looks really good. This is a really, really good-looking game. And again, it is a testament to how good some games looked on the PSP. The PSP was a pretty solid little handheld, dude. Like it ran some games really really well.
It did. It absolutely
And
did. Yeah.
we all have heard the meme, X walked so or X crawled so Y could run, and
Yeah.
like legitimately, I believe the PSP crawled so that the Nintendo Switch could run. Like because now we're seeing like just how good some games can look on handheld. I will say this game being a handheld, there is one thing that kind of holds it back a little bit, and that's the mission structure, because you can tell, especially in the side missions, LOL side mission plug, you can tell though that this was designed with more of a pick up and play or play on the go in mind, because the side missions are really really short. They're really really linear, and they're more or less you going down the same corridor and fighting 3 to 4 groups of enemies, and then maybe fighting a bigger enemy at the end. So it's you can kind of see that the side quest and that side mission structure is kind of dated, or it doesn't really work 100% on strictly homebound consoles. But again, I didn't have like a problem with it, because for me, when it came to grinding XP or finding more summons, it made that a lot more quick. It made it much quicker, because I wasn't having to go through these elongated side quests to where I'm having to do an arbitrary list of objectives. Instead, I'm doing 2 or 3 missions and I'm getting a summon, and that to me, it's outdated and it somewhat doesn't fully work, but at the same time, it works in certain ways. So it's one of those where I'm not completely upset about it. I will say this, as far as performance, the summons cutscenes, especially for like Bahamut and Ifrit and Odin, some of these cutscenes are jaw-dropping. Like, the amount of detail and the amount of effects in it. Again, like, you can't call this a lazy remaster, in my opinion.
No, I was always gonna say I feel like most of the budget went into the summons. Yeah, but they really did like keep the consistency, because like every Final Fantasy game, every Final Fantasy game that I have played, the summons always just blow my mind. Like I remember playing Final Fantasy 15, I believe.
Yes,
and
those were
the
crazy
summons,
as hell too.
the summons in those games were like just mind blowing. Like the Leviathan summon, I remember that boss fight at the time just being like one of the most wow moments in gaming for me. Just like Square Enix, just like when it comes to their combat with Final Fantasy VII, they go above and beyond, just because it's really flashy, but like it's just so cool to see it. I think what was really cool is the fact that when you fought the summons for the first time, that you were able to go back in missions and re-challenge them and to unlock them. But if we're talking about mission structure, yeah, this is absolutely still hindered back from just because this game was like on the PSP, which at that time it just wasn't able to do as what his big brother, the PlayStation 2, was doing at the time. And the mission structure. One thing I find super annoying about the mission structure is just the fact that like if you're like doing some of the higher level ones up, or and it's just like sometimes it's just like I just want to get straight to the end of this thing, because like these little metro bosses. I mean, it's a great way to level up. It's a great way to level up your level, your materia, and all that, because it uses what the DMW structure here.
Yeah.
I remember this kind of being a controversial thing back with the original release, because sometimes it just feels like you can win a game, win a fight just based off of RNG. But as you progress through the game, I like the fact that you're just continuing to unlock new characters for the DMW. Like, and also as you're building relationships over time, like in chapter 4, when you start building a relationship with Aerith, you get like this really like OP healing ability, or Cisne or Song. A lot of these characters that you just come across.
And then the damage ones for guys like Angeal and Sephiroth are awesome as well.
Yeah, they are really cool. And then the fact that in missions that you can find just like these random DMW characters like Chocobo or Kate Sith. Which I know a lot of people are like, "Who's Kate Sith?" If you haven't played 7 and you only played 7 remake, you're not gonna know who Kate Sith is just yet. Or hell, if you, once you get to was it Nibelheim? What do they call it?
Something like that. It's really funny, and and I'm sure there's probably a reason for all this. I found it very funny how like it's almost like the Norse realms. Like there's like some of the names are very similar. Obviously Midgar, not Midgard.
Yeah,
Nibelheim,
yeah,
Niflheim. Like I don't know if that's intentional. I'm sure there's probably a reason why they were named the way they were. But I thought that was funny, especially coming off of Ragnarok. I really thought that was funny playing this, and I knew that from Final Fantasy VII. Like Medeoheim, we've heard that name before. I've heard that name plenty of times. It's nothing new.
yeah,
I just
yeah.
found it funny the like I don't know, just the similarities. It was interesting to me.
But just remember, Odin is a summon here.
Yeah, and that's part of what makes it interesting as well. Is like there's part of me that like feels like it's very intentional when Odin is a summon.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I know when you get to, I just want to make sure it is Nibelheim, correct?
Nibelheim, yes.
Yes, what I loved about that section is the fact that there's just like this really cool Easter eggs here. Like they call them the Seven Wonders. Once you find the last one, when you go inside of the mansion, you actually find a character who will be introduced in the next part of Seven Remake, Vincent Valentine,
Yeah.
who is probably one of my favorite characters. He's a little bit edgy. He's kind of like a vampire. He even got his own game on the PlayStation 2. I don't remember if it was any good or not. But I like the way that this game is really like so many throwbacks. So it is a prequel to Seven, but if you play Seven, then you'll understand all the references. Plus, just being able to experience one of the most famous storylines is when Sephiroth finds out what really like his true creation and all of that, and he just goes ballistic, and he basically just sets fire to it, and it shows that really well-known cutscene of him just like standing in the flames, just looking up at the screen, and just knowing that that was the big, character, like the side when he turns, and it was really cool to see that that happen. And I say one of my favorite characters that is introduced to this game is Angeal.
Yes.
Everybody always wondered like where Cloud got the Buster Sword at, and it was originally Angeal's. And I like the fact that that Buster Sword carries from him to Zack to Cloud. It's just like the passing of the torch.
You know, we talked about this when we were playing it. You know, as far as all the characters that you see in Remake that are also here, it really surprises me. I understand a little bit more because obviously the first episode of Side Mission we ever did, Final Fantasy VII Remake, was one of the games we talked about. That
My
feels
God,
like a
it
lifetime
was.
ago. But I said that I felt like Cloud was a very boring protagonist, very kind of bland. It's funny how Crisis Core gives a lot of context as to why he is the way he is now. Gives quite a bit of context as to why he is more of that cold, soft-spoken protagonist. It's because of the events of Crisis Core, specifically the ending, because he's not like that in a lot of this game. And in most of this game, he's much more energetic. He's got more personality, and you see that. So the ending here really does give more context as to why he is the way he is in Final Fantasy VII Remake. As far as characters that stood out, I feel like Genesis is an incredible villain.
Yeah,
I feel like Genesis might be one of the best villains we've seen in gaming this year. He was a really good villain.
yeah, like.
And the funny thing is, I feel like part of the game is you're also supposed to somewhat understand his side, because it really does kind of blur the line. I don't think that the game just outright makes him the villain. I think that like part of the game is also pointing out like, hey, you work for Shinra, or you work for a section of Shinra. Remember, they're kind of shitty too.
Yeah, no, Shinra is definitely the main villain when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. I mean, they're just they're big pharma, if you know what I mean. I mean, they're taking materia.
Well, Matt's getting political. Here we go.
I'm not gonna get political. No, no, no. I mean, they're taking the pure essence of the world to create materia, and they're slowly killing the world, which is like why one of their motivations in Final Fantasy VII is, to seek Aerith and keep her alive because she's the last living ancient.
Last
but
living
I
baddie, more
feel
like
like
his shit.
I feel like that the motives behind like that Genesis has is, it makes sense in the context that it's like really. I think one of the things I really liked about Genesis was just like he's not a super deep character, but I like the quoting of the
The
of
poem.
Loveless, the
Yeah,
poem.
yeah.
He's like, oh, the William Shakespeare of Final Fantasy, in a way. I just think that the end game with Genesis was just kind of like, that's it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does kind of just end, and that's the thing. Like Genesis has so much buildup, especially in that last chapter where you fight him. There's so much buildup, and then the final fight just kind of happens, and I don't know, like it's not like the greatest ending to a game ever, or at least for a villain's plotline ever. But I feel like again, like he's a really really excellent villain throughout 95% of this game. The last 5% is just how the arc kind of wraps up. It just kind of ends. And again, I feel like the way it ends, they're trying to say like, hey, understand, like he wasn't the good guy here. He was definitely the antagonist. But keep in mind that he was fighting a greater evil.
Exactly.
And the greater evil he was fighting was Shinra. So it was one of those things where like, yeah, his methods were very, very questionable at best. But he also, he was fighting a bigger evil in his opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree that Shinra is the bigger evil when it comes to Final Fantasy VII. So the other thing is, and you mentioned it briefly, I think that what really makes the story of this game excellent is Sephiroth's arc. That is what makes this game. Zack Fair being a great protagonist also helps this game as well. He's again one of my favorite protagonists in a game this year, but Sephiroth's arc, when you realize that he has not always been this crazy psychotic asshole, like he was very normal. He was a very normal, very very normal human being, and then
he was a hero.
And he was a hero, like he was looked up to. He was a hero, and he finds out that he's been lied to his entire life. Finds out that he was essentially made by a machine, and he just kind of loses his shit.
You find out that your mother was Genova, who, was taken from the asteroid that hit Midgard, and then you were created from the cells of that to become this super soldier. I'd probably go ballistic, too.
I probably would, too. Like, it's one of those where it's like, again, like, if you don't know backstory, you would just think that Sephiroth was this random psychotic weirdo. Now, to be fair, Sephiroth also is up there and is considered to be one of the greatest villains in all of gaming, and justifiably so. He's an excellent villain. But this really does give context of like, every villain is the hero of their own story. Like he was a hero. He was a looked up to hero. He was a god among men essentially. And because he was lied to and because he finds out that, everything he knew wasn't true, he just goes ballistic. He sets fire to that village. He loses it. But again, that's part of what makes this story work is his arc. His arc is incredible in this story. Now, there will be people that hear us raving about this game that are like, well, what the fuck? Like, spoiler alert, it didn't make the top 10 list, mainly because it came out so late in the year. If this game had come out in the middle of the year, this game probably would have made my list.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, no lie whatsoever. This game probably would have made my list. And it was very close to it. I said on the episode, again, spoiler alert, because this episode's coming out before our top 10, I said that the game that was closest to making my list that didn't was Harvestella, and this game was right behind it. Like, I was close to putting Crisis Core on there. So, it's an excellent game. I want to talk, before we end this, I want to talk about the ending a little bit, because it was interesting to me that, and we dropped a spoiler alert earlier in the episode, so if you're still here and you don't want to hear the ending, you better fucking run now, because it's getting spoiled. It was very interesting to me that they kept the original ending. Very, very interesting to me that they kept that, and I know that as a remaster, it's not a remake, they're not trying to redo it, but Matt, I had a theory, and I want to see what your thoughts are on this. I think we've talked about this a little bit. I feel like a lot of the decision making, besides the fact that it's just a remaster and not a remake, I feel like a lot of the reasoning for keeping the original ending where Zack dies, I feel like a lot of that is to stay consistent with, okay, for Final Fantasy VII Remake to happen, Crisis Core had to happen the same way it did back in 2009, 2007? When did it come out?
Oh, man. It
was around that time, right?
It was around that time, yeah.
So I feel like for Final Fantasy VII Remake, for those events to happen, I feel like Crisis Core had to happen that same way. But because it happens that same way, Final Fantasy VII Remake's events then change the ending or change the timeline in another alternate universe to where Zack lives and ends up getting back to Midgar with Cloud, both of them alive, and he gets back to Aerith, and I don't even want to know how that love triangle goes. But do you think that there's a possibility that that's the case, that for Final Fantasy VII Remake to happen the way it did, this game had to have that same ending?
Now, I was thinking about that because I remember when they announced this game, I was thinking that...
Like, what if... Like, did you think they would change the ending to keep him alive?
I think they were going to change the ending because I felt like that this was not a prequel to Final Fantasy VII anymore, but a prequel to Final Fantasy VII Remake. But I was actually kind of glad that they decided to keep the original ending because a lot of people did not get to experience this game. Especially if new fans were introduced with 7 Remake, then this was the perfect opportunity to just, show the game off as it was originally intended. Now, I think that this game is still the same timeline that we are accustomed to, that, we originally gotten before 7 Remake decided to completely alter timelines by creating a new one. So I don't think that this game is going to be directly connected to the remakes. I just think that this was just the opportunity to, re-release this game that's been stuck on the PSP, which I call PlayStation. Actually, I had a really good pun for this one, and I can't remember what it was saying.
Man, that's rough. You were gonna make a joke and you forgot it.
I got it. PlayStation Purgatory. Like the PSP.
Okay, I got you. Okay, that's pretty good. I give you that one. That's pretty solid. I'll give you that. I'll give you points for that one.
I got it out. But I'm glad they kept it because it really is a strong ending, especially the way you play it out is you are Zack and, Shinra has turned against you because they believe you have sided with, Sephiroth, Angeal, and Genesis, and you are seen as, public enemy number 1. And it's such a strong moment that you are just standing there going up against all of these Shinra soldiers. And like as you're fighting them, Zack is just, he takes damage. The DMW starts going freaking crazy, showing you memories, and then Zack is losing those memories. It's really sad, especially once you get to that final moment and you lose those memories with, Aerith because of the relationship that they were building between these two characters. And then, Aerith feels Zack, losing life.
Yeah.
But I do hope that with what they're planning with 7 Remake makes sense in this timeline, and it's not just trying to please the fans who were, so sad about what happened originally. But this it kept the spirit. And I'm glad everybody got to experience what happened to Zack because so many people were very confused about it, whether you just got it in cutscenes.
Yeah.
But it's one of those moments that has to stay because it's very impactful on the future, and I'm glad they kept it.
Yeah, the ending, it's heavy, dude, because as you're fighting all of these soldiers, like, you're sitting there, like, you really feel like it's impossible. Like, there's no way you're living through this, and as the DMW is just going wild the entire time, like, you're sitting there going, wow, I'm really about to fucking die. I really am not going to live through this. Like, it's a crazy emotional ending, and I do appreciate them keeping the original ending here. I will say... And if we want to make this a prediction, I can make this an official prediction. It's going on record. I don't think that this is the last we have seen of Zack Fair. I do feel like in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I do feel like we're going to get more hints and we're going to see more of him as we get further along. And hopefully, do we know if Rebirth is coming next year guaranteed? Have they said that? They say holiday 2023 is when that's coming out?
I'm thinking so. I don't want to get my hopes up because they're releasing Final Fantasy 16 next year as well.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
But I do know the fact that they do have everything pretty much done as far as Rebirth is going because they're not starting from they're not starting from the beginning with the engine and everything. Like they got it all done. I also did want to add that 7 Remake added DLC that ends with Zack walking to the church. So, yeah, he's definitely alive.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's gonna be really interesting to see where Final Fantasy VII Rebirth goes from what we've seen in Crisis Core, what we saw in Remake a couple of years ago. It really is going to be interesting to see what happens there and how it affects the timeline, how they make use of these alternate timelines, alternate universes. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Side Mission. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Side Mission Pod. You can follow us on Facebook and TikTok as well at Side Mission Podcast. For Matt, I'm Rusty. For Kyle and Thacker's fucking non-existent asses. Thanks for listening. Exactly. I know. They both have the game. Like, I'm pretty sure both of them have the game, and just neither one of them have fucking played it. But it's all good. For Matt, I'm Rusty. Thanks for listening.